Julie asks, do you split the threads, for example, 3 threads, then use wax on each thread that you're using? Hi, my name is Elle. I'm a cross-stitch artist and designer here on TikTok. Let's talk about it. Most skeins of floss come in a package like this. I like to put mine onto bobbins so that they're easier to unravel and keep track of without them getting tangled. If you're new to stitching, you might not know this, but DMC floss is actually made up of 6 separate little strands. And typically we're not stitching with all of them when we're doing cross stitching. If you're doing embroidery, you might be. Now, different people have different preferences on how many of these little strands they're going to be using when they stitch. I prefer to stitch with 2 strands. So that means for every length of thread that I cut, I'm actually getting 3 lengths that I get to use. Because there's 6, I'm only using 2 at a time. So that means I get 3 sets to use. Some people find that once they have split the strands apart, that their thread is difficult to work with and is more prone to tangling. So sometimes they will use wax, like Julie is asking, and they will run the thread over a piece of wax, like beeswax, in order to coat it and make it easier to work with. I personally have never done this, even when I've worked with metallics. I don't even own beeswax to do this with, so personally it's not something that I do. It's definitely not a necessity, but I do know that there are tons of people who do it all the time with all of their thread, and that really works best for them, and they like the way that it feels when they have waxed their thread. Everybody stitches a little bit differently, and everybody's preferences are a little bit different. So even if I'm working on a piece and you're working on the same pattern, our pieces might come out looking just a little bit different. And even if they look exactly the same, we may have worked them in a different way, depending on how many strands we've used, whether we've waxed our pieces or not, whether we're using English or Danish method. All of that is sort of inconsequential because the finished piece and whether or not you like how it looks when it's finished and whether you like the process that you used to get there are more important. So there are no right or wrong ways. There's just personal preference. Personally, I like to use 2 strands and I don't bother to wax my thread. If you like to use a different number of strands and you like to wax your thread, go for it, as long as you're happy with your product at the end of the day. I hope that helps, and as always, happy stitching.